Hey everyone, I'm Liz Ferry and today I'm going to show you how to add a rainbow mane and tail to your crochet horse dolls. If you want to see how I made these dolls, you can find the links in the description below, or if you want to see the technique I used to make the fire horse mane that I made for my ponytail doll, you can find that link too. Some things you'll need for this tutorial are a crochet hook, I'll be using a size E. You'll need some yarn to make up the rainbow color of your horse. There are two different ways you can do this, and I'm going to show you both ways. The first and simplest way is to use a variegated yarn. I have Monet from Red Heart brand here, and as you can see, the yarn has a gradient effect between several different colors. Another method is to pick individual colors of several different yarns to customize your rainbow gradient. I love this method because you can pick any color, and you can really pack the colors in, and use a ton of different yarns to make the gradient effect. Of course, this requires that you have a giant stash of yarn like mine. For this method, I'll be using a ton of different colors. I don't remember exactly what brands or colors they are specifically, but I'll be using bright red, bright orange, golden yellow, bright green, turquoise, sky blue, bright blue, light purple, and violet. You'll also need some scissors, stitch markers, a yarn needle, a grooming brush, a straightener, and of course you'll need a horse doll. If you'd like to purchase the written pattern for my horse doll or for my centaur doll, it's available in my Ravelry store. You can find that link in the description below. I'll be using the same horse doll that I made before that I used in my regular black horse mane video. I was never happy with this just being a regular horse, so I'll be turning this horse into the beautiful rainbow unicorn that they've always been on the inside. Of course, that means that I'll have to get rid of this old black hair. So I'm going to cut off the hair as close to the body as I can. Just be careful not to cut through any of the actual stitches of the horse's body if you ever have to do this. Ugh, so painful. Alright, now we can get to work on the new mane and tail. First, I'm going to create a foundation to place the strands of my mane onto. This process will be fairly simple using the variegated yarn. All I'll have to do is to crochet down the back of the doll's head and neck using my variegated yarn, starting at the top of the doll's head and ending at the bottom of the neck just above the shoulders. So I'm going to pull up a loop at the top middle of the back of my doll's head, and chain 1. That's going to count as the first stitch, so I'll mark it with a bobby pin. Then I'm going to single crochet in a straight line down the middle of the neck into each row until I get to where I want my mane to end. I'm going to do about 20 stitches total, but if you made a larger doll, you might need more stitches to get all the way to the bottom of the neck. Okay, I've reached the bottom of the neck just above the shoulders, so now I'm going to end the row. To end, I'm just going to slip stitch to the next row of the body, then I'm going to cut off my yarn and sew in the ends. Next, I'll show you how to create the foundation if you're using multiple colors of yarn. I'm going to crochet down the back of the doll's head and neck, but this time I'm going to change colors every couple of stitches so that the foundation matches the hair gradient. Since I'm using 10 different colors and I'm going to create 20 stitches along the back of the doll's head, I'll find out how often I need to change colors by dividing the number of stitches by the amount of colors that I'm using. So that means I need to change colors every 2 stitches. So I'm going to pull up a loop at the top middle of the back of my doll's head using the first color that I want to add to my gradient, which is going to be my bright red color. Then chain 1 to count as the first stitch, and mark it with a bobby pin. Then I'm going to single crochet in a straight line down the middle of the neck into each row until I get to where I want my mane to end. Again, I'm going to create 20 stitches total, but this time, after every second stitch, I'm going to change colors to the next shade in my gradient. So I just need to single crochet one more using red, then I'll leave that stitch open and finish the stitch using a loop of the next color, which is the bright orange. Then I'll single crochet 2 times using this new color before changing colors again to my golden yellow yarn. So again, leave the second stitch open, and finish the stitch with a loop of the new color. Then single crochet 2 times using the golden yellow, before changing colors again to the bright yellow. Leave the second stitch open, and finish the stitch with a loop of the new color. Then continue in that pattern until you've made 2 stitches of each color all the way down the back and have 20 stitches total. If you want to learn more about how to change colors, check out my color changing tutorial. Okay, I've reached the bottom of the neck, just above the shoulders, and now I'm going to end the row with a slip stitch in the next row of the body. Then I'm going to cut off my yarn, and sew in the ends. If you'd like, you could leave these tail ends loose though, and use them as an extra row of hair. I think it weakens the foundation stitches a little bit, so I'm just going to sew mine in. Be careful not to pull too hard on the yarn when sewing it in, so that the loops of the stitches don't tighten, and so that the shape of the horse's body doesn't pull in and warp. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the tail and create a foundation row for my strands. This one is going to be a little different though. Again, I'll show you using the variegated yarn first. So I'm going to pull up a loop in the bottom of my horse doll about where I want the tail to start. And then I'm going to chain 6 to act as the foundation chain. Okay, I have my 6 chains. Next, I'll chain 1 more to count as the first stitch. Again, I'll mark that stitch with my bobby pin. Now I'm going to single crochet into the 3rd chain from my hook. Then I'm going to single crochet into each of the remaining chains until I get back to the bottom. I should have a total of 6 stitches, but if you made a larger horse doll, you may need to create a longer tail. Just chain more than 6 in the foundation chain. Okay, here at the bottom, I'm going to slip stitch into the same stitch where I pulled up a loop at the beginning of the row. And I'm going to cut off my yarn and sew in the ends. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the rainbow tail to create a foundation. This time, I'll once again use color changes, but since there's a lot fewer stitches in the tail foundation than there were in the main foundation, I'll leave out a few colors when making my color changes at the tail. Since I'm just doing 6 stitches total, and I have a total of 10 colors, I'll leave out 4 of them. I used multiple shades of the same color for the mane, so I'll just use the basic bright colors and leave out the other shades for the tail. So I'll use bright red, bright orange, bright yellow, bright green, bright blue, and violet. I'll be changing colors in reverse order this time to make sure the violet stitch is at the end of the tail and the red stitch is at the top. So I'm going to pull up a loop into the bottom of my horse doll about where I want the tail to start using my violet yarn. And then I'm going to chain 6 to act as the foundation chain. Okay, I have my 6 chains. Next I'll chain 1 more to count as the first stitch, but in order to change colors, I need to use the next color, which is blue. So pull a loop of the new color through, and mark that first stitch with a bobby pin. Now I'm going to single crochet into the 3rd chain from my hook, but I'll leave the stitch open and finish that stitch with a loop of the next color to change colors to my green yarn. For the next stitch, I'm going to single crochet on top of the whole chain to cover up the violet color. So I'll pull up a loop around the whole chain, again leaving the stitch open, and finish that stitch with a loop of the next color, which is yellow. Then again, repeat the process and change colors to orange. Then change colors to red. And create the last single crochet, this time finishing the stitch with the same colors since we don't need to change colors anymore. And now I have a total of 6 stitches on my chain. Here at the bottom, I'm going to slip stitch to the same stitch where I pulled a loop up at the beginning of the row. And I'm going to cut off my yarn. I'll sew in the 2 purple ends. And then I'll use the other color tails to place 2 stitches over the violet at the bottom of the row to cover it up a little more. Alright, now that I'm done with my foundation rows, I'm going to cut my strands of yarn to make up the doll's hair. Each strand needs to be about double the length that I want the final hair to be. So I'm going to measure and cut my strands for the mane and the tail. If you like, you could use a book or a piece of cardboard that's about the length that you want your hairs to be, and you could wrap your yarn around the cardboard to make sure all your strands are the same size. I'll be using this piece of cardboard that I cut to the length that I want the hairs to be. Make sure you cut enough strands that you can place 1 strand of yarn onto the loops at the top and bottom and onto each post of each single crochet from our foundation rows. That means that you should cut at least 3 strands per stitch. So I'll cut 60 strands for the mane since there were 20 stitches in the mane, and 18 strands for the tail since there were 6 stitches in the tail. If you like, you could make the mane and tail different lengths, but for the sake of simplicity, I'll just make all the strands the same size. For the variegated yarn, this is an easy process. All you need to do is cut the correct number of strands and place them at random on the foundation. For the rainbow mane, though, this is a little more complex. Since there are 2 stitches of each color in the mane, and I need 3 strands for each stitch, I'll cut 6 strands of each color for the mane, The tail is a little more tricky though. I still need to cut 3 strands per stitch of a given color, but since I didn't use all my colors in the tail, I only need 3 strands of the main 6 colors that I used. But I still want to add the other colors from my gradient to the tail, so I'm just going to cut 2 or 3 strands of each of the other shades that I didn't use in the foundation, and I'll place them in between the other colors every once in a while. Also, instead of working onto the posts of the stitches, I'll work onto the stitches that I sewed at the bottom of the row to cover up the violet at the bottom of the tail. Okay, I finished cutting all my strands. Now I'm going to anchor my strands. I'll show you how to do this using the rainbow main, since the strands of the variegated yarn can really go in any order. First, I'm going to take one of my red strands and fold it in half to create a loop in the middle. Now I'm going to pull up that loop from the middle of my strand into the top loop of one of the red stitches of my foundation row. So I'm going to work into the top loop here, and leave the bottom loop here empty for now, so that I can add another strand to that loop later. So take a strand, fold it in half, and pull it up from the middle into just the top loop of the stitch. Then pull both tails through the loop, and pull both tails to tighten the loop. And now the strand is anchored. Now I'm going to work into the bottom loop only for the next strand, the loop we left out when anchoring the last strand to this stitch. You can see the bottom loop here. So take another red strand, fold it in half, and pull it up from the middle into just the bottom loop of the stitch. Then pull both tails through the loop, and pull both ends to tighten the loop. And now the strand is anchored. Then I'll do the same thing to the next red stitch and add 2 of my strands to each the top and the bottom loop. If you like, you could stop here and move on to the next stitch, but I'm going to add another strand around the post of the stitch to add more volume to the hair. You can see the post of the stitch here, underneath where I placed the first 2 strands of hair. So I'll take another red strand and fold it in half. Then I'm going to pull up a loop around the post of the stitch, and pull the tails through the loop on my hook, then pull the tails to tighten the strand. I'm just going to keep on doing that until I've added a strand to the top loop, the bottom loop, and the post of each stitch of the foundation row of my main. Just make sure to match the color of the strand to the color of the stitch. Alright, I've added all the strands to my foundation rows of the main. Next, I'll do the same thing to add my strands to the tail. Also, instead of working onto the posts of the stitches, I'll work onto the stitches that I sewed at the bottom of the row to cover up the violet at the bottom of the tail. First, I'll place the main 6 colors that match the tail foundation. Then I'll add a couple of my extra colors to the tail. I'll just anchor these strands on the same loops that I anchored the main color strands, so that there are 2 strands anchored to the same stitch for a few of the stitches. I'll make sure to add at least 2 strands of each extra color, one for the top loop, and one for around the post of the stitch, so that you can see all the colors on both sides. Okay, I've finished adding my strands to the mane and the tail. If you like, you could just leave it like this, or you could pull apart each strand, brush and straighten the hair to give it a more realistic look. This is pretty much the same technique I used in my doll wig series and in my regular horse mane tutorial. I'm going to take each strand of yarn and I'm going to untwist them so that each individual thread of the yarn is loose. Then once I've completed the entire mane and tail, I'm going to use my grooming brush to brush out all these strands to give them a more hair-like appearance. When you brush the strands, it really brings out the gradient effect between the colors. Once I've finished brushing out the hair, I'm going to use my straightener at a low temperature to straighten the hair in small bunches at a time. And now the mane and tail are complete. I also made a unicorn horn for my doll, but I'll show you how I did that in a future video. There are so many ways that you can customize the mane and tail to get a more unique look. You can add curls or braids to the horse's mane and tail. use different variegated yarns, or different colors in your gradient. If you want to see the technique I used to make this fiery mane and tailed ponyta from Pokemon, you can find that link in the description below, as well as the links for my horse body tutorials, more doll hair videos, or my pattern store on Ravelry, where you can find all my designs. If you use any of these techniques to make a horse doll or centaur doll of your own, I'd love to see your interpretation. You can find all of my social media links in the description below. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a like and share it on social media. And if you'd really like to help out the channel, you can donate to my Patreon. You can get some pretty cool perks through Patreon, like seeing my videos early, access to some of my prototype patterns, and discounts in my Ravelry store, depending on your level of donation. You can find out more about that at patreon.com/fairyrings. You could also subscribe and click the bell icon so that you don't miss my next video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!